Good afternoon. I'm Kathleen Odney. Elise's story tend to be based on historical women, and her latest book is no different. We will hear a bit about her new release, Fast Girls, a novel of the 1936 Women's Olympic team, which came out July 7th. Fast Girls explores the gripping, real-life story of female athletes, members of the first integrated women's Olympic team, and their journeys to the 1936 Summer Games in Berlin in Nazi Germany. Elise is joining us from Seattle, where she resides with her family. Welcome, Elise. Thank you for being with us today. Please remember, if anyone in the audience has questions for Elise or the panel, use the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. I'll now turn the spotlight over to Elise and let her introduce our amazing panel of guest authors and begin the program.
Hi everyone, it's so great to be back in the sense that I'm connecting with you through Zoom. So I had so much fun when I visited for Learning to See. It's really a pleasure to return to talk about Fast Girls. And when we were initially talking about what to do for today, it seemed like 2020, while it's not going according to plan, it's offering up a great opportunity to make some connections that normally would be really tricky to pull off. So today's panel seemed like a great way to pull in some authors who I've been wanting to chat with about historical fiction and introduce their books to all of you. So I'll start off with our most local author for all of you, and that's Yangsze Choo. She's in San Francisco. And Yangtze's most recent book, The Night Tiger, has been a New York Times bestseller. There she is. Hey there. And also a Reese Witherspoon book club pick. So super exciting. And her first book, The Ghost Bride, was also a New York Times bestseller and also adapted for a Netflix original series. So Yangtze's had her hands full. She's super busy. Next up, we have Kate Quinn, who is another Californian, although meeting us from Southern California. I think, Kate, you've lived everywhere maybe, but San Diego is your most recent home, so welcome. The Huntress is her most recent book. It's been a New York Times bestseller. And her second most recent book, she's written a bunch, is The Alice Network, which was also a Reese Witherspoon pick. So quite an illustrious group here. We also have Noelle Salazar, who is an author, also appeared by me in the Seattle area. She's a USA Today bestselling author of The Flight Girls. So hi, Noelle.
Hi.
And then last, but certainly not least, we'll head out to, I think, a place where we'd all love to be right now, in Hawaii. Sara Ackerman is joining us to talk about her latest book, which also just came out at the end of June, Red Sky in Hawaii. Sara is also a USA Today bestselling author. So this is so exciting. Thank you all for joining me. This is kind of like, if I could have seen everyone in person, that would have been awesome, but I think that would have also been much trickier to pull off. So
it would have been more
martinis. Flexible. I'll warm us each up by having you each give the audience an idea of a really quick rundown on what your book is about. So I'll kind of just go in the order we just came in on. So I'll start with you, Yangsze. Tell us about The Night Tiger.
Ooh, this is actually I've always had trouble explaining this novel because it's set in 1930s colonial Malaysia, where I'm from. And it's about a Chinese dance hall girl and a child servant who believes that his master, a British doctor, is also a man-eating tiger.
Great, thank you. Kate, let's head over to you. Tell us about the Huntress.
I don't know how to follow that elevator pitch. I really don't. Okay, The Huntress is about essentially what happens when three very unlikely people, one a battle-haunted British war correspondent and a teenaged American budding photographer and a Russian female bomber pilot from the all-female regiment known as the Night Witches, band together in post-war Europe to hunt down a German war criminal, a woman known as the Huntress, who has gone to ground in post-war America.
Thank you. That's good. You did great. Noelle, how about you on The Flight Girls?
I'm really terrible at summing this up. So it's about a young female pilot who is training airmen recruits in 1941 Hawaii when the Japanese fly in. And it's her story of she joins the Women's Air Force Service pilots and she serves her country ferrying and testing warplanes for the military. It's a love story. It's a story about female camaraderie. And it's a story about just following your dreams no matter what.
Awesome. Something we should all be doing. Thank you. Sarah, what tell us about your newest?
Those are all hard acts to follow. So Red Sky of Hawaii was inspired by real people and events. It's really about a hideaway house that was built just in anticipation of the Japanese invasion that everyone thought was imminent. And it's about an eclectic group of people that end up at this hideaway house just after the attack on Pearl Harbor. It's a blend of love, intrigue, and a little touch of magic.
Perfect. Thank you. And Kathleen did a great job. Thank you for explaining Fast Girls. The only thing else I'll say is that, the Olympics it was supposed to be starting this coming Friday in Tokyo. And I, for one, am really brokenhearted that it's not. And the Fast Girls can give you a little taste of the Olympics if you're missing it too. So let's start also with a little bit of warming up just to give our audience kind of a sense of who we all are. I'm gonna ask you each if you write with paper and pen or if you start with typing. So Kate, how about you?
Clatter, clatter, clatter all the way.
Okay. Sarah, how about you?
Always typing. Yeah. I take
Noelle?
notes in a notebook, but typing.
Yeah, typing or notes in my phone a lot of times.
Good. Yangsze?
Me too. I am afraid that I'm addicted to my computer, and one day I actually tried to write longhand and I found that I couldn't. So it's a lot easier to start because then you can also erase things like, oh, that was all wrong. So
That's true. I do a lot of paper and pen, but I think part of the beauty for me is that I can't read my own writing, so I actually have to then start another draft immediately. What do you need to work? Do you like silence or do you like music? How about you, Noelle?
Silence. I get super distracted by music, though I love to listen to music in my car, and then that kind of helps create scenes. But when I'm writing, it has to be quiet.
Nice. Sarah?
Silence.
Yes. Kate?
I absolutely need music. A lot of movie soundtracks. Anything, that's sweeping and sort of seems to tie in historically to whatever era I'm working on.
Nice. That's great. Yangsze?
ooh, I like that. That's a great idea about the music setting the mood. But I also prefer silence. Although in my case, it's usually punctuated by the screams of my children. Actually, in horror, I told them, don't come in today. I'm very busy right now. So.
Right. I know. I'm used to the kids' noise and the dog barking too. And then last but not least, do any of you have something special you need to write? I always have a bar of dark chocolate in my desk. I'm kind of embarrassed to admit that, but there you go. Sarah, do you have any standby snacks on hand?
Well, I'm usually writing before I get up to eat and have a cup of hot cocoa. So sometimes I'll just have a banana and peanut butter. That tends to be my go-to.
Very healthy. I like it. Noelle?
Chocolate, always chocolate. Mint chocolate, actually.
Perfect. Yangsze?
Chocolate for me too, but except I'm not so brave to put it in my desk. I should put it in the fridge so I actually can add to my step count every day. So walk to the fridge and back again.
Good idea.
That is smart. I should do that. Kate, how about you?
Coffee, black, brewed to a strength of preferably somewhere beyond lighter fluid and in a container the size of a bucket. I've got my coffee today, and because if I just finished power yoga before this, and if I didn't have coffee, you would see me face down and snoring into the camera of this particular discussion. Nothing to do with lovely ladies, just the caffeine is essential.
Right. Well, nice. So keep the caffeine coming so you don't fall asleep. So let's start off with, I think people always want to know why we all write historical fiction, and everyone sort of comes at it from a different angle. So let's see, Kate, I'll go back to you. Why do you write historical fiction?
Well, I think in many ways, especially when you're coming to tell women's stories, because I get sometimes the question of, why you obviously did all this work research. Why didn't you just write a nonfiction novel? And often there's a little bit of a sneer attached to that, which I frankly do not appreciate. But the reason why quite often is that, especially when you're looking at women's stories, there may not be enough about them, about whichever woman you're looking at in history surviving to responsibly be able to write a thorough biographical story. But because so often when historical fact survives about women, it is in the shape of the facts that exist about the men in their lives. You see the women sort of in the shadows of history and in the cracks. It's harder to find enough about them to actually be able to write nonfiction quite a lot of the time. And that's even true about really well-known women, much less when you're finding more obscure historical figures. So quite often I think historical fiction might be the only way you could responsibly try to bring these women to life, because you have to be able to fill those gaps in the historical record. You have to use your imagination. And that's something as a biographer you can't do, but as a novelist, you have to do it. So therefore, I'd look at it as a way to bring women's stories to life in a way that is, responsible, as well as sometimes maybe being the only way that you can.
Right. I can totally relate to that. Thank you. Sarah, how about you?
I didn't set out to write historical fiction, but I grew up in Hawaii and I was raised hearing all about the war from my grandparents and my parents that were here during World War II. And Hawaii, we've got such a rich history. I mean, we're the only place where we had in World War II where we had, attack on our homeland. And so I grew up on these stories, and I think the war for us here in the islands, it was really a defining moment. And not just the attack on Pearl Harbor, which I think most people focus on, but also just the lives of the people. There was a profound effect on the lives of the people in Hawaii. And, a lot of historical fiction is set in Europe. And having been raised on these stories, I thought, I'm in a pretty good position to tell our stories here.
Yes, I love that you're drawing upon the Pacific Rim. I think that's so important. I think that's such a neat thing about this group. We've got all these West Coast authors here. It's kind of interesting to hear how maybe our take on historical fiction could differ slightly from authors from a different part of the country. So thank you. I'm glad you drew that in. How about you, Noelle?
I'm going with Kate's answer.
Yeah.
I mean, I didn't expect to write historical fiction either. The story sort of fell in my lap, but like Kate was saying, I found this book that had all these little anecdotes about the women. And so they just inspired me to, I did get asked, like, why didn't you write about one woman? But there wasn't enough story about one woman that I could find. So I didn't want to go that way. I wanted to combine as many stories as I could, these little bits and pieces. And I think it's just such a clever way to teach people about history. And so, yeah, I feel like that's why I wrote this story, to share these women. And I still learn stuff about them every day, which is pretty amazing. So, and I'm so glad there's just so much women's historical fiction coming out as well.
Right, right. I'm so glad you snuck in that word teaching, because I think the best compliment we can often get as historical fiction writers is like, people will say, oh, I loved your book. I had so much fun reading it. I learned so much. And it's like that little learned part is so gratifying, because I mean, I learned so much when I'm working on my books. And so, and I'm a former high school teacher. So I love when people say that. So that's great. I'm glad you mentioned that. How about you, Yangsze?
Well, I always think like the past is another country, and I started writing, I guess so both my novels are set in colonial Malaysia, as it was then called. And I think they were actually inspired by a sense of place, because when I was growing up, you could always find these crumbling remnants of these grand colonial bungalows left by the British. And then some of them were very small and some of them were really large and staffed with like lots and lots of servants, like 20 gardeners. And, when I was growing up, many of them had actually fallen into disuse. And a couple of times we went exploring. My father, as a civil servant, rented a smaller version of these from the government at one point. And I thought, I was always taken by the idea of who lived here, what sort of secrets were living in this house. And so my novels aren't based on historical people per se, but on things that might have happened at the time. And A Night Tiger, for example, set in the 30s. And it talks a lot about numbers and Chinese superstitions, and also the Malaysian idea of harimau jadian, or tigers who turn into men. And so I also wanted to set it at a time in the 30s, which I've always thought was such an interesting era between the wars, and also filled with superstitions that, nowadays they'd be like, oh, so-and-so died of this. We'll just get CSI to look at it. That's also the beauty of historical fiction.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
I know. I just want to tell everyone too, we haven't really rehearsed what we're all saying right now, but you have perfectly segued in, Yangsze, to my next question, which is, where do your ideas come from? So it sounds like for you, it was really setting and that sort of your imagination as a child kind of setting you free of it. Is that right?
Yeah, it was, I think, very much so. Do you want me to continue and answer that question, or?
Sure. If you have a little more to say, that's great.
I do think that's very much about where do stories begin? What starts them off? And I think sometimes it's just a very odd story, or it'll be things that you overhear. So, for example, my first novel, The Ghost Bride, I was thinking about, I'd been actually in these newspaper archives, and there was a sentence saying, the incidence of spirit marriage amongst the Chinese has declined. It was very matter of fact. And I thought, what are they talking about? And then I realized, oh, it is the marriage of the dead, when a living person would marry the dead. And that, that started the whole thing off.
Yeah, that's fascinating. Thank you. Noelle, how about you?
Well, for the Flight Girls, my aunt happened to be studying to be a docent at the Museum of Flight, and they were having this new exhibit for the Women Air Force Service pilots. And so that's how this book came to me, that I found all these little anecdotes. And for the book I'm working on now, a friend emailed an article and said, write this book. And so I said, okay, I will do that. But it was really intriguing. Again, it's just these little stories that come to you that just, they pique your interest. You have to know more, you go digging, and you can't not write that story. Once I maybe one day get out of historical fiction, I have no idea. But for now, people just keep throwing them at me. So
yeah, that's so handy. Those are good friends to have.
right?
That's funny. My daughter gave me my most recent idea for my book about the Olympians. She was doing a biography project for 4th grade, and she picked an Olympian, and it really got me thinking about these pioneering women athletes. So friends, family, childhood experience. I love all of this.
Yeah.
And Sara, it sounds like you too, I mean, your sort of childhood, your upbringing, family stories and setting, this all helps bring your ideas about. Is there anything else that you would add to that?
Definitely. So my grandmother was a teacher. She taught in a tiny sugarcane town during the war, and she was always telling stories. She had, and as a young girl, so impressionable to this wonderful storyteller. All these things that she talked about stuck in my mind, and so later on when I started writing these, like, for example, my first book, she would always talk about this lion that the Marines brought, kind of smuggled over from California with them, that turned out to be their mascot before Iwo Jima. And so I was intrigued by this lion. And, when I looked into it, usually then I'll start even getting more ideas when I start going down the rabbit hole of research. But I found a picture of my mother petting this lion when she was like 4 years old on an army jeep. So that kind of thing, I feel like, is just even one little personal connection, you kind of think, oh goodness, this is meant to be, in a way.
I love that. Do you have a copy of that picture with your mom and the lion?
I have it on the computer. Yeah.
Okay. You should put that on Instagram, and everyone can go to your Instagram account later and see it. That sounds like such a great picture. Thank you. Kate, how about you?
Well, when it comes to, where did you get your ideas? It's really very simple. I get my ideas at Walmart, aisle 7. There's an idea farm. That's where it is. I go pick one up, about one a year, and that's all there is to it. Super simple. Only now I'm in quarantine and I can't go to Walmart, and so I will have no more ideas, and there will be no more books until quarantine's over. So that's really sad. Actually, I would say it all really goes back to the fact, I would kind of go with what Yangsze said about where you read something and it hooks in your mind like a fish hook. And the interesting thing is that 10 authors can read 10 different things and will all be hooked by something different. Now, I guarantee you, all of us could have read that same little squib about spirit marriages, and yet Yangsze is the one who comes up, it hooks in her mind. For all of us, maybe it will be something different in the same newspaper that hooks. So the nice thing is that we all have different imaginations that work in different ways, but it always just tends to be generally a historical event or a historical person that will hook me. And for my most recent book, The Huntress, it came around with two actually. One being that I read about a German female war criminal who had shot and murdered some Jewish children in the Eastern Europe during the war, and then was later found after the war living as a housewife in Queens, New York, having married an American businessman while he was on holiday. And I was like, that is a story there. How do you hunt down a woman like that, for one thing? Who finds her? And then on the other hand, what is it like to be the person who is part of that woman's family and has no idea what she was capable of or what her past was? So that was one part of the hook. And then the other hook that I got was I went down again, one of those rabbit holes that I think Sarah was mentioning, 2 a.m. Google hunts, daisy chaining around and looking for inspiration. And I find the story about the Night Witches, which was the Soviet Union's all-female regiment of night bombers. And bam, that was it. Somehow these two puzzle pieces had to be a book. And then it was just a lot of really clumsy jigsaw puzzling and me awkwardly mashing things together until they finally fit in some order or another.
And it's amazing how that awkwardness disappears and you iron it all out and it becomes a great book. That's true.
12 drafts later.
Right, right. So we've heard a little bit about these rabbit holes, and I think any author can relate to that, like the sort of interest you get in and the paths you tread in your research. I would love to hear about research surprises that have come about while you've been working on your books. So Noelle, I know you have a good story about this. Why don't we start with you?
If you're talking about that I found out the women were not given military benefits, that was shocking to me. So these women were, first off, they couldn't sign up unless they had 500 pilot hours. In fact, at that time, more women had pilot's licenses than driver's licenses, which is insane to think about. And they had to be like a certain height, which a lot of them weren't. And but yeah, they had to train the Army way. They had to go through everything the men went through for training, but they didn't get military benefits. So if they were injured or if they were killed, it was up to their friends or family to get them home to a hospital or in a box. So yeah, I thought that was shocking. And then when their service was finished a year and a half later, the file on them was sealed for 35 years. So really nobody knew about them.
So why were the files sealed?
I still really don't know. It's
wow.
A big mystery still.
That is.
Yeah.
That's great. Okay, thank you. That's really interesting. Yangsze, how about you? Some surprises when you're tracking ghosts?
Well, actually, I really enjoyed it. Going back to this whole rabbit hole thing, I think the fun thing about being a fiction writer is that one gets to say, to do all one's hobbies and say like, oh no, it was all for work. That's why I'm making recreating cake recipes. It's all for my book. So yeah, I really enjoyed that. And one of the things that I did like a lot doing for the Night Tiger was reading about the Big Cats of Malaysia, which would be mostly, we had leopards, we had a lot of tigers, and I had stacks and stacks of books, you know, like Man-Eaters of the Malay Peninsula. And my mum and dad, who came to visit me from Malaysia, my mum was actually quite horrified. She's like, why are you writing about these bloodthirsty things? Why don't you write something cheerful? So I was like, but you know, my dad was really into it too because he likes animals. He was like, look at all this. And the interesting thing was that, you know, in the 30s, there were a lot of deaths due to animal attacks. But the funny thing was that most people would actually prefer to say that even though leopards took most people, they prefer to say it was tigers. And I realized that even then there was a certain cachet to being carried off by a tiger rather than by a leopard. So that was surprising. And all the research on 1930s dinner parties, in which at one point it was like very sophisticated to give a dinner party with out of tin cans, because if you like, look, it's asparagus from France, you know, rather than eating local food. That was big then.
Wow. I love what you're saying about the animals, because when I was reading your book, I mean, that sense of the hunt is just infuses so many pages in your book. You do have that sort of anxious sense of potentially being stalked by the tiger. So that's really clever. Thank you. Sarah, how about you? Some surprises?
Well, it was fun because I was writing about the volcano, Kilauea volcano, which is a really remote part of the Big Island. And something that this was actually, I found this was kind of the reason I started to write the book, is because I came upon this really neat old mysterious house in the park, but in the boonies. Like, you would never know it's there, hidden away. And then when I looked into it, I saw that the house was built by a prominent businessman before the war started, in anticipation of the Japanese attack. And just how much was really known in Hawaii before December 7th, 1941, that, you know, an attack was essentially imminent and people were already building escape houses. One other fun thing I thought is that the volcano erupted in early 1942, and we were in a blackout, right? So, you know, here we are blacked out, and then the volcano starts erupting. And so, and then the military ended up bombing it to try to stop it.
Wow.
So that caused a pretty big uproar here with the Hawaiians, and I don't think it had any effect on it, but it was a big deal of them bombing the volcano to try to get it to stop, because they thought it would lead the Japanese right to us during the war. So that was kind of interesting too.
Yeah, a volcano definitely defeats the purpose of a blackout. Hard to avoid that. That's fascinating. I had never heard that. Wow. Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Kate, how about some surprises in your book, The Huntress? That from your research, I should say. There are lots of surprises in the book itself, but let's focus on your process.
I'm still hung up on the idea that some army higher up okayed the order of, like, we'll just bomb the volcano and that will, like, what, scare it into stopping?
It was General Patton.
Oh, for God's sake, of course it was Patton. All right, that mind blown. Okay, that's great. Let's see. Research surprises for the Huntress. The thing I really liked was researching the women who were the ladies of the all-female bomber regiment. And the thing I had with them, which was the greatest asset for my particular research, was that in, I think, the 1990s, someone did a series of interviews with the surviving night witch pilots. And there were a surprising number of them, all these women who are now, you know, quite elderly. And I think that's honestly because if you survived the kind of conditions they flew under during the war, nothing was going to kill you after that except old age. So all these ladies were interviewed, and it was really quite something to see this, you know, picture of this, you know, from the war, of a girl, you know, with these chubby apple cheeks and her, you know, in her flight uniform, you know, with her, you know, Order of Lenin, you know, proudly pinned to one side, and she's 19 years old maybe. And then you see the same woman, a picture of her as this elderly babushka, still with her apple cheeks, in her cardigan, and, you know, still with her Order of Lenin proudly pinned to that cardigan. And then you hear this, you know, sweet little old lady saying, oh, you know, sometimes, you know, a bomb sticks on the rack, so your navigator would just climb out on the wing and lay flat and, you know, like, give it a push. And, you know, I was just floored when I would read the kind of things that they would matter-of-factly recount as, like, oh, really, just go wing walking at 0 degrees Celsius in the middle of the night, 1,000 meters above the ground, while being strafed by German searchlights and anti-aircraft guns, and you're just going to lie flat on the wing and, you know, give the bomb a push, and if your plane goes, you know, tipping, you're off you go. And I was, all right, that's going in the book. I mean, I don't see how it can't go in the book. So I was constantly finding my jaw on the ground at the things that these women did to prove themselves. And they really did have to prove themselves, because, you know, much as Noelle's ladies faced, just because the ladies in Russia managed to actually get into the air and into combat doesn't mean they did not face, you know, sexism along the way. I mean, there was famously a Russian general who looked at them, at this all-female regiment, and said, I've been handed 112 little princesses. What am I supposed to do with them? And, you know, that went over really well, let me tell you. But so there was a lot of proving yourself, and there was a lot of, you know, stiff upper lips when it came to, we will prove ourselves to be just as good as the all-male regiment. And in fact, they surpassed any record from any of the all-male regiments.
Right. And I know that when we talk about then, there's sort of the research you do on your computer and reading, and then there's the hands-on research, which can be some baking we've heard about. But Kate, you also actually went flying to learn more about the night witches, right? Didn't you? Can you tell everyone about that?
Yeah, I actually went flying in in an actual World War II era biplane that was not the same model the Night Witches flew, but it was very similar. And the charming pilot, it was absolutely wonderful about answering all my questions, and mostly we tried to do things like, could you do this? Because I'd read about like these biplanes that would carry 4 people, like 2 in each cockpit, and his answer was always something like, well, I think you can do it. I'm just not sure you should. That pretty much seemed to be the answer for everything. Is a lot of the stuff they did, you could do it. It's just not advisable. But he was wonderful, and we flew all over. And I was not looking forward to this. I'm a person who white knuckles in a 747 when it banks. But flying in an open cockpit plane is a totally different experience. It does help that you can talk to the pilot in the meantime, and he can tell you it's all okay. But he was very good about answering my questions. He was not interested. He actually flew bombing runs all over the hills of San Diego, which was wonderful. He did not let me climb out on the wing and do a little, crawling along to swat imaginary bombs. And I really think that he was quite a spoilsport about that. But you can't have everything. So altogether, yeah, that was pretty much the most hands-on research I have ever done, and it was a blast.
Yeah, I'll say amazing. That's such a great adventure. Sara, I'm hoping you've hung from the rim of the volcano or something, or what have you done that has really been hands-on research for some of your books?
Well, I think the main thing is just getting out there. I'm really big on setting. I love setting. It's so important to me. And just, I live 2 hours away from the volcano. And so while I was writing this, I went there as much as I could just to get the feel of the place. I've been going there since I was little, and I love the volcano. I know it like the back of my hand. But just to, hear the sounds of the birds. We have these amazing rainforests up there. It's not erupting anymore, so there's no lava happening at the moment. There's earthquakes though, a lot of earthquakes lately, so that could change. And I think just interviewing people, talking to some elderly people in their 90s who were up there at the volcano or in Hilo during the war, and hearing their stories. That's, I haven't gone on any big adventures. I'm thinking maybe I need to write a book about some other place so that I can go on a research trip. But
I don't know. It must be so hard when you live in a place that is just begs to be written about. So I think you have a good problem there. Thank you. Noelle, how about you? I don't know if you actually went flying. I know you've had some adventures that helped you with the Flight Girls. You want to tell us about one of those?
Yeah, so right after I got my first round of edits, I got to go out to the museum, the National Wasp Museum, and which is amazing because I got to, so the base had burned down years ago, and there's a college there now. But they have the original fountain that the women used to jump in after they graduated, and there's some signage. And then up on this little rise, there's like the runways, and then there's this little rise where the museum is. And I mean, there's nothing like standing in the space that your heroes stood in. I don't know how long I stared at the sky, just staring at the sky like a plane was gonna come buzzing me or something. It was amazing to walk through. They have like their handprints in cement. They have the link trainer that they trained blind in. They had the plane that my main character's, it's her favorite plane. They had that exact plane in the exact colors. So that was fantastic. And then I got to speak with one of the WASP on the phone and just kind of ask her like day to day, like, what did you do? Like when you weren't training and you got up, what did you do during the day? It was really interesting to me to find out like, besides the training, what was your life? Because I was in boot camp and I kind of have this sense of what that would be like, but I wanted to hear in the 40s what that was like. And then after it was all said and done, last year, they do an annual WASP reunion. And so last year I got to go and I got to meet 2 of the WASP. And I got to go up in a warplane. And that was, Kate, I hate 747s, but oh my gosh, going up in a warplane was the most amazing thing. I got to fly it a little. It was incredible. I even thought,
right?
Wow. I know. I was like, maybe I need to take lessons or something. It was so amazing. And so an interesting thing that happened too is when I was there for the reunion, there was this woman standing I had a little table with my books, and I went over to say hi because I had stepped away for a minute. And I'm talking to her for a little bit, and then I noticed she had this big button with this woman's face on it. And it was the woman I had talked to on the phone previously. And I was like, oh, you know her? And she was like, that's my mom. She had passed away 2 months before. So there was her daughter. I got to connect. We cried. It was ridiculous. But also they had a funeral for the women who had passed that previous year. They do this beautiful ceremony. I mean, it was such an amazing thing to be a part of and get to see. And I was so honored. And that's something about writing historical fiction too, is you get to honor these people that did this amazing thing, and you bring notice to their lives. And so it's been a really cool journey that I thought I was just writing a book, and it really turned out to be a lot more.
Oh yeah, definitely. That's such a great way of putting it. It always ends up being just so much more. That's so true. Thank you. Yangsze, so you were baking. Did you, and you were for many years adventuring around as a child. Anything else that you would want to share that was sort of a specific adventure for your research?
Well, so Night Tiger is set in a part of Malaysia which I know fairly well because my grandparents grew up there, and so did my parents. And in the Kinta Valley, just outside the large town of Ipoh. And actually both my grandfathers were miners. They were tin miners. And my grandmother was also a rubber tapper. So they did a number of the jobs that you see people doing in the novel itself. And my mother's experience, my mother did not go to school till she was 11. And before that, she stayed home to cook and clean. And she's the one who taught me how to catch, butcher, and pluck a chicken. And that a lot of that went into the novel, but I find it very hard to write about things that I have no idea how to do. And I don't know whether you've had this feeling as well. Sometimes you'll be reading a book and you'll be like, I don't really understand what's going on. It gives you this strange, like, floating quality. And so one of the things that I did do, one of the characters in the novel is a dance hall girl. And no, I did not go and become a dance hall girl because we don't have them anymore. I know, Dawn. But
I was thinking you were going to lead us to dancing.
No, but it is very interesting because they had these Chinese dance halls in the 1930s. And I read a contemporary account of them in which, I mean, they were really popular because that was what people did for entertainment. And there were all these rumors about the women there. They were very strict about them. And they said you could not approach them without a ticket. And after that, you had to go away and not talk to them. And the rumors were going around that they were either all prostitutes or they were all virgins or some sort of nun. So that was really interesting. I was like, well, that's quite a range. But my main character, besides being a dance hall girl, is also a dressmaker. And my aunt was apprenticed as a dressmaker when she was young. And so for the novel, I actually tried to make this Chinese dress called cheong sam or qi pao. It is like the iconic Susie Wong Chinese dress, with the high collar, and it's very fitted, and it is so hard to make. I mean, I had a dress pattern. I had taken a dressmaking class at a high school late at night, and I was like, this is so hard. In those days when there was no elastic, so the shape of the dress is all like cut on the bias, and the front, that collar that opens is so difficult to make. And after that, I was like, wow, this is like always nowadays, to really learn how to do it, you should apprentice yourself to some old man in Hong Kong. But I realized, wow, it's really hard to make dresses fit just so.
Yeah. No, and I always think, for me, it's just like a passing project, but to think of how people used to sew all of their clothing is always so humbling to me. It's no wonder people had very small wardrobes.
Yeah, and they patched, and they were, actually, when you look at old clothes in museums, a lot of times you can see like patches and darns, and they all tell a story. Like, why did she tear her skirt right on the butt? What must have happened there? So everything has a story. Another rabbit hole. So.
Yeah, no, it's so true. I love it. Thank you. So I know we have some questions coming in the Q&A, and I urge people to send more in, but in the meantime, let's really quickly go around and hear what everyone's working on now. So Noelle, I know you are hard at work on a new book. You want to just give us a little quick description of it?
Yeah, so it's a story of two sisters that were teenagers, and they seduced and killed Nazis.
Oh, there you go. Okay.
Teenage girls, yeah.
Great. Thank you. All right. I'm looking forward to that. Yangsze, how about you? What are you working on right now, aside from all the beautiful baking and cooking you do?
Oh, well, I like what Kate said about like that, now the pandemic is on, the idea shop is closed. So, but it's been very hard to be creative. I am writing a third novel. It is set in Manchuria, which is northern China. And I don't really have an elevator pitch for it because I'm still not quite sure what it's about yet. I hope that my agent is not listening to this because she would be horrified. But that's actually how I've written a lot of my novels. I never really quite know where they're going. I'm crossing my fingers that things will work out this time. I had actually been planning a trip to Northeast China, which is sort of like, what do you call it? It's sort of like it's not a very, it's a very old part. It's like post-industrial China. And I was going to set it in 1908, and all my friends from China, like, why are you going there? Why don't you go to Shanghai or something like that? And then and I had some friends who were novelists who were like, why don't you set your book in a place where you'd like to visit? Like, I'm setting my next novel in Paris. And somebody else was like, and mine is going to be in Venice. I was like, oh, I see. I clearly missed out when they handed out the notes on that.
I know. I've had some adventures with that too. Some very desirable locations, and then some that I wouldn't necessarily have visited, left to my own volition. Well, I love the mystery you're leaving us with. We'll all look forward to that. Kate, how about you? What are you working on right now?
Well, I'm actually in between starting the new book and just about to get copy edits. God help me on the one that is sort of in the pipeline. But the one I have coming next is titled The Rose Code, and it is about the three very different women in World War II England who are drawn together and become code breakers at Bletchley Park. And if you're not familiar with the code breakers of Bletchley Park, these are the minds that were assembled from all over Britain, many of them women, who joined in the supposedly impossible task of breaking the unbreakable German military codes. And they succeeded so spectacularly that it is estimated by historians that they shortened World War II by at least 2 years and millions of lives. So that is the next book that I have coming out March 9th. And I had to learn a lot about code breaking, which had me swearing a lot because I'm not a mathy person. And I will tell you right now, I managed to write about it, but it didn't matter how many times I read some Brit's memoir where he says, oh, code breaking is actually terribly simple. And then he launches into some long diatribe about bigrams and tables and, buttoning up for the crab and the lobster position. And I'm just like, Nigel, that is not simple at all. And I don't care what you say. So you'll have to be the judge whether I actually captured any of this process accurately, but you have till March to do it.
Good. I'm looking forward to it. Thanks, Kate. Sarah, we'll finish off with you. Give us a glimpse of what you're working on now.
Okay, well, my first draft is currently with my agent, and it's titled Radar Girls as of this moment, although my book titles always change. It was inspired, it's really about the women of the Women's Air Raid Defense, which it was formed just after Pearl Harbor, and it was top secret at the time. And these were local women, military wives, even students that were formed to essentially to protect the Hawaiian Islands. They were working in the radar stations and the command centers around the island. So it's a really interesting story. It's been really fun to write, although it was also hard for me during the pandemic to kind of stay creative. I think it took about three or 4 more months than usual for me to do this draft.
Okay, well, that sounds like a great story. It's also set in Hawaii?
Yep, Oahu.
Yep. Okay, exciting. And now I'll move over to some Q&A, but I do see a question right here, which is, who is your favorite historical, or what is your favorite historical fiction book or author, other than yourself? Does anyone just have a quick answer for that before I shift over to Q&A? Yep, Kate?
I am an absolute sucker for Bernard Cornwell. I love blood and battle books, and he's the best.
Cool. Cool. Anyone else want to toss one into the mix?
I love The Book Thief. I just think it's so unique and powerful and amazing.
Yes, yes. All right. Anyone else, or shall let's see, I'll move over to Q&A. What are some of our favorite research sources? Can we describe our research process? Boy, I have a feeling it varies a little bit person to person, but I'd love to hear some answers to that. Yangsze, you want to start us with that? Do you have any favorite sources, or like, can you describe your process? Is your process the same from book to book even? Let's go with that.
Okay, so let me describe my process to you. It mostly consists of my sitting at my desk, which is actually a coffee table on the floor, and then crying a bit and then rolling around on the ground and then saying like, oh my goodness. So I don't really have an outline. I wish I did. I do have novelist friends who have outlines, and I admire them tremendously. In fact, my husband has said to me, why don't you have an outline? There'll be less of this crying on the floor if you have an outline. So,
well, you definitely make the process sound very glamorous. Thank you for that.
That's just my process. I'm hopeful that everybody else has a more streamlined process. But in terms of doing research, like I said, the wonderful thing about writing fiction is that you get to write, or you get to research what truly interests you, So in my case, I actually went down, I spent a lot of time looking at what sort of food they were serving in 1930s dinner parties, what tiger hunts were like, lives of a dance hall girl, and a lot of time of thinking about what that world might have been like. And that is really fun, because people ask you, like, do you read for that? And I think it actually is the reverse, that you read what you want to read, whether it's like, what was it like being a rat catcher in the late 18th century? I actually read an entire pamphlet on rat catching late one night. And I told my husband, this is fascinating. Do you know that, that actually there's a reason in order to trap rats, you should scatter oatmeal and not solid food, because if you give them solid food, they take it and they run away. So that the bait should be oatmeal and they have to stay there and eat it. And he said, nobody's going to read a book about rat catching. And so anyway, so I think it goes that way. Like, you read what's interesting to you, and then somehow or other, your brain kind of mashes into like, wouldn't it be interesting if this was also with this? And maybe that too, so anyway, that's.
I am so glad you did not write the rat catcher book and you wrote the night tiger.
There's a big difference between rats and tigers.
Does anyone else have a really different process from Yangsze? Does someone here have a real outline that they work with? Like, is someone kind of the opposite of that? Or is everyone kind of rolling? Okay, Kate?
I do a fair amount of outlining, but it's one of those things where I work through an outline process. So I know very well what's going to happen in, say, Act 1 of the book before I get started. I know pretty well what's going to happen in Act 2. I have a basic idea of what's going to happen in Act 3, and then I don't tend to get too much more detailed than that, because the roadmap tends to change along the way. Like, for example, when I wrote The Alice Network, I went through all the way till about the 85% mark thinking that one of the main characters was going to get killed in the climax, and then I realized, I don't think that's going to work once I actually got there. So sometimes things change on you. Yeah. I like doing a lot of character work. Don't worry, we all have this.
Yeah, no worries.
I do like doing a lot of character work beforehand, and I find one of the great things for research especially is a lot of wonderful things like war diaries, and I love those for especially when I moved to the 20th century, because quite often, as much as I love to travel to the places that I'm writing about, and because, it's great to think, it's like, I just have to take that, winding road trip all the way through the south of France, renting a vintage convertible, because that's what the characters do, and it's research, and I can now write it off in my taxes. That's a great idea, but on the other hand, you're also looking at places that look vastly different now than they looked even 50, 60, 70 years ago during the time when my characters would have been there, especially when we're talking wartime zones that have been massively bombed and then rebuilt. So sometimes it's actually more helpful to read a war diary, which has descriptions of how things looked, what daily life was like, photographs of the time, it can almost be more helpful to go there and to look for vintage photographs, vintage descriptions, vintage diaries, than it is to go to a place and look around and think, this is a beautiful city full of skyscrapers that are all 20 years old and nothing like what my heroine would have looked at standing on the site.
No, that is so true. And I can totally relate to your bit about knowing, like, you know, a lot about the beginning and your knowledge of what you're going to do kind of trails off. I though do always know my ending. Like, in fact, a few books I've written my final scene first, like almost right at the beginning, because I know where I'm going and I know where I'm starting. It's that whole middle part that is,
That's the middle part.
Yeah, requires a lot of thinking.
That's so cool that you write your final scene. That's really amazing.
I mean, we'll see. I usually know where I'm going, but there are a lot of adventures to get there. I'll move on and I'll give, you know, some other authors maybe who didn't answer that question some opportunities for these next one. Maya is asking a couple great questions. And Maya, I'm actually going to start with your second, which is what provides writing inspiration when you're stuck? Sara, any thoughts on what do you do if you're stuck?
Well, one of the first pieces of writing advice that I heard that really stuck with me is to always leave off mid-scene. So when you stop for the day, you're in the middle of a scene, or you've at least started. And so I do that, and I find that I rarely get writer's block. But there are days when I'm just like, everything I'm writing, this is the boringest thing that's ever been written. And I just keep writing. And sometimes I'll look in books. I have my kind of go-to books. I love The Secret Life of Bees. I like Where the Crawdads Sing. And I'll just kind of open to a page and even just see their language, how they do transitions or whatever help I might need, what might be stuck. I'll look at that.
Yeah, I can totally relate to that. I love looking at other writers for problem solving ideas. Absolutely. Thanks, Sara. Noelle, what do you do if you're stuck? I see you do a lot of cooking and things like that too.
I've been doing a little bit of baking lately. No, I tell myself I don't believe in writer's block because I feel like that's just putting something up I don't need. I try and just keep writing. And if it does feel like it is the most boring thing ever written, a lot of times I go for a walk. I just find that my characters talk to me when I'm walking. So I find that's just one of the best, like if you go and you walk and you let your mind just kind of look at the flowers and look at this house, and this is what I would do with that house. And then all of a sudden you've got these characters that are following you and talking to you, and it's just refreshing. And I find it really clears my mind and gives me inspiration. And a lot of times I come back like with the answer or with a new scene that I didn't know I was going to be writing. So yeah.
Yeah. I think walking is great. I feel like driving with all sound off and just kind of, that's like, I can definitely do a lot of thinking while I'm driving. And the shower, I get a lot of great ideas in the shower. So yeah, I think you just have to step away sometimes without feeling like you're just completely, giving up. Not that kind of walking away, but just the walking away and sort of changing that headspace. That's a really great idea. Yeah. Anyone else want to add in anything there, or should I move on to a new question? Noelle, we have one that's very specific to you about how did your experience in Navy boot camp inform how you wrote about the women and their camaraderie?
I found throughout my life, I've been a part of groups of women a lot. Dance classes, gymnastics classes. I was an NFL cheerleader, and boot camp was incredibly special to me. I was discharged. I had a general discharge because I was injured. I was not injured there. I was injured before I got there. And it just really, there is something about being in a room with 40 women in bunks. They are ridiculous. They are hilarious. They become your best friends immediately. I was there with basically a bunch of 18-year-olds from the South. So I immediately had a Southern accent, but there was just this very sweet feeling of being there, of having to march through the base before the sun came up and hearing all these voices singing cadence across the base. It was beautiful. So my memories of that were just maybe romanticized a bit, but it really informed this sense of and of the camaraderie, of the friendship, of trusting one another.
That's great. I just want to clarify, did you do that for the Flight Girls, or had you done Navy boot camp before, ahead of time, just on your?
I was 18. It was
Okay.
right after high school.
Oh, wow.
I don't know what to do with my life. I'll join the Navy.
Okay, that is one way to come up with some direction there. Thank you. So let's see, do I have time for one more? I'm not sure. I'm gonna go for it. And if I get stopped, that's fine. Let's see. Oh, Lart, let's answer just a quick writing question. Someone wants to know how we found our agents. I know, I'll just start off with that I had a finished manuscript with the other Alcott, went to the bookstore and library and looked in the acknowledgments of a bunch of books that I considered to be comparable titles. And everyone thanks their agent in their acknowledgments. So I just had a really long list that became an Excel spreadsheet, and I was prepared to start querying all those agents, wrote my letter, and really, so it was just a blind query for me that I was able to generate some interest. Did anyone have a story that's sort of different from that? Yeah, Noelle?
Yeah, so I'm horrible at sending query letters, like famously horrible. But I'm also really shy, so it's surprising. But I went to a writer's conference, and there's something about the chemistry that was really important to me. So when I saw my agent and heard her talk on a panel, I knew that she was right for me. I didn't know if I was right for her, but immediately when we started talking, we had the same sense of humor. We really clicked, and that was really important to me because all the other ones I had talked to, I just didn't feel that way with. So, yeah, I mean, it's terrifying, but it's such a good experience.
Yeah. So that's a good range. I was from the slush pile. You met in person. Kate, I just saw you wave your hand. Any final bit to add there?
I kind of had two things. One, I was querying like mad, and I could have papered a large bedroom with rejection letters. I will have you know. But I started getting those rejections, which were a little more encouraging. You know, this is good. It's just not quite for me. And I had one agent who rejected me so nicely, but so was so encouraging about my writing style. I immediately wrote back and said, I have another book under the bed. Here's the elevator pitch. Would you consider this one? And she was interested enough that she read that and ended up taking me on. Now I had a great relationship with her, and we did 6 books together, and she died of cancer, which I found absolutely horrendous. And so I was agentless for a while, and then picking up the next agent was completely the opposite, because I found my current agent, and I had met her at a conference, and she came up to say hello to me because her teenage daughter had read my very first book, the book that I sold my first agent on when I wrote her back. And teenage daughter had said, Mom, you need to read this. And she'd read this. So she came up to say hello to me at a conference. And a year and a half later, when I was looking for another agent, I remembered her. I looked at the kind of things she was representing, and we had a chat, and I've been with her ever since. So 2 very different stories there.
Yeah, that's great. So there's some ideas for different writers of all the different paths to finding an agent. And also, I want to point out that you don't always necessarily stay with the same agent. I mean, Kate just illustrated that. So there's a lot of hope out there for writers with all their different stories to tell. So,
yeah,
wow, thank you. Oh, did I hear someone else?
Oh, no, I was just going to say, you know, for everyone who's writing, just to keep on writing, and I also came out of the slush pile. It sounds like the creature, I came from the slush pile, but you know, many of us did. And a lot of people sometimes ask, like, did you have to know someone? Did you have to know someone ahead of time? And, you know, I think the answer really is no. You can actually absolutely cold query people and come out of the slush pile.
Right. No, that is such an important note. I mean, writers, take hope. There is, you will be found if you just keep writing. That's such a great note to end on. Thank you, Yangsze. So thank you all for joining in today, chiming in from various parts of the West Coast. I really appreciate it. I'll turn things now back over to Kathleen. So we will all turn off our video and then mute ourselves. Thanks again, everyone.
Thank you, Elise. We all have so much time to read right now because of COVID. I'm so excited to dive into these books. I've already ordered all of them on Amazon, and they're waiting for me. So thank you for a fascinating program. I just wanted to give you a quick reminder to save the date for Library Fest 2020. It will take place virtually on September 23rd to the 25th. and details will be posted on the Walnut Creek Library website in the upcoming weeks. So be sure to visit the website, wclibrary.org. Sign up for our bi-weekly e-newsletter to receive information on all our upcoming library programs. And lastly, if you purchased our panelists' books from Orinda Books, you will have received a Zoom meeting link to chat with our authors after the program. Just give us a few minutes to get started on that meeting, and we will see you very shortly. Thank you again for attending, and we hope you will join us for Library Fest 2020. Thanks, everyone.